How many snaps did they run in the 14 personnel?
That's only for us.
100% of the snaps.
What's going on, everyone? It's Preston. Welcome to 14P Fantasy. For those of you who missed the news this past week, I'll be joining the guys over at 14P and bringing you all some best ball content. So to kick things off today, I was going to get us started focusing on some stacking and early best ball drafts. But before we get started, just wanted to let everyone know the Patreon is up and running. Link can be found in the description below. And if you like what we're doing over here at 14P, feel free to hit the subscribe button below as well. So let's go and kick things off with some best ball stacking and early best ball drafts. And what I mean by early drafts, and when I refer to early drafts, is I'm talking about any best ball draft that occurs before the actual NFL draft. And that's because it's an important distinction because we have so much chaos, so much uncertainty going on right now and the months leading up to the draft. And, even right now, we haven't even hit free agency yet, but Underdog has already filled one best ball tournament. So a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion going on, but it's an important subject to talk about, and stacking is especially important to at least consider and discuss at this time. So for those of you who are kind of a little new to the subject or less familiar with best ball or less familiar with stacking in general, stacking is a term that's often used with best ball. I mean, the two are almost synonymous, but stacking was originally brought up and thought of as more of an edge that we can gain from playing DFS to kind of combine quarterbacks with their pass catchers to take advantage of correlation, because we know when a quarterback all of a sudden sees an uptick in their volume and has more pass attempts, or suddenly they're playing at a more efficient level, throwing more touchdowns, turning the ball over less, someone's going to benefit. If a quarterback passes for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns one week, someone's going to benefit from that. And it's their pass catchers. Whoever's catching the ball is going to benefit in terms of fantasy. So we can kind of combine those two, take a collective bet on an offense, and sort of hedge our bets that way by stacking these quarterbacks with their pass catchers. And it's particularly useful in best ball too, as we kind of take a season-long approach as well. For instance, last year in 2021, we had Baltimore with Lamar Jackson really take a step forward in terms of their overall passing volume. Lamar was averaging nearly 7 or 8 more pass attempts per game than his next highest season. And so what happened is pass catchers benefited from that. I mean, Hollywood Brown for the first time actually finished as a wide receiver 2. And as we all know, Big Mark Andrews finished as the tight end 1 on the season. And that was all because of this massive increase in volume, thanks to Lamar throwing the ball more. So it would have been really advantageous, besides the fact that Lamar got hurt towards the end of the season, but at least for that, first half or first 75% of the season, it would have been really advantaged to have stacked Lamar with his pass catchers in best ball, because it would have been a great collective bet to hit on, actually, exceed some ADPs collectively with multiple players. This kind of idea of stacking has even sort of evolved a little bit more in best ball than it originally did in DFS. We're now stacking running backs and whatnot too. And that's because, if we look at it like a 1-game sample size, clearly a quarterback and a running back probably aren't going to have their, ceiling type performances in the same week. But if we take more of that macro approach and kind of zoom out and look at the whole season, it's not unlikely that we can have a quarterback and a running back having some very high-end seasons together if the offense is playing well, if the offense has a lot of volume, they're running a lot of plays, they're efficient, they're making a lot of trips to the red zone, etc. Like, that's how we can actually bet on an offense altogether. And so stacking has really evolved to include all the positions that we care about in best ball. But that kind of brings us to the subject at hand, and that's stacking in early best ball drafts. I think it brings up an important question, as in, should we really be stacking right now? It's March. It's March 3rd. And as it stands, if we take a look at all 32 NFL teams, I think we can confidently say maybe we can name 18 of their starters for next year. Like, so nearly half of the quarterbacks we only know who will be starting next year. And if we look at the top 45 wide receivers being drafted on Underdog right now, we can only say who 25 of those 45 wide receivers will be catching passes from. So that's, just over 50% for both categories that we actually have confidence in as to who we can stack these players with. And kind of on top of that, we're already uncertain as to who we can stack, and there's less options in general, but the options we do have are starting to come at a premium. For instance, Joe Burrow is being drafted as the QB5 or in the 5th round right now as the QB5. And, with that, like that's a very rich price for me on his ADP. And I think a lot of his ADP stems from just the fact that he's so stackable. You have Jamar, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, all there to stack with him. And people are just going crazy to stack him with those guys because he's one of those elite and just few options in general that you actually know who you can stack with and can be confident in that. So for me right now, just with all this uncertainty we're dealing with, I'm specifically only looking to stack as like a tiebreaker. And I'll give you all an example of that. If I'm currently in a draft and I've started my draft with Cooper Kupp, and I'm looking to draft a quarterback near the 9th round, you have Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford kind of going right there in that same range. If those two QBs are also kind of in the same tier for me, and I'm looking to take a quarterback, I'll ultimately side with Stafford in that case because I already have Cooper Kupp. So it's kind of more of a tiebreaker in that sense when you have a sort of tier break between whether it's the pass catcher or it's the quarterback. I ultimately use stacking as the tiebreaker, but it's not something we need to worry about too much. It's not something we need to go too heavy into stacking. We don't need to do any reaching or anything like that or go overboard in terms of the stacking right now, just because we have so much uncertainty. Of course, once the summer hits, once a lot of things get clarified, and come August, like I'll certainly be looking to stack a lot more than I am right now. But for now, stacking is more so of a tiebreaker for me. But of course, there's a lot of edge grinding in best ball. Everyone wants to know, where can we get our edge? Where can we get our advantage over our competition? And for a while, that was stacking. And so people are going to say, oh, if we're not stacking, where's our edge? How are we going to get an edge? And for me, what I like to use as an edge right now is the uncertainty. I like to use the uncertainty to my advantage because there's a lot of players that the people drafting right now are just lower on because of the uncertainty. And I'll give you an example. A great one for me is Jalen Hurts. He's being drafted as the QB10 right now on Underdog, despite finishing the 2021 season as the QB6 on a points per game basis. And that was also kind of after his rushing production sort of took a downhill turn towards the end of the season just because of that ankle injury. But we're talking about a guy who has top 5 fantasy production as his ceiling, and he's being drafted as a QB10. And the whole reason behind this is because Jalen Hurts is the poster boy for trade rumors. It's every week we get a new trade rumor about a new quarterback Philadelphia is supposedly trading for. And so this in turn lowers his ADP for whatever reason, because personally to me, I just don't think it's very possible that Philadelphia can keep Hurts on the roster and trade for, someone who would actually be an upgrade like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. And so it just doesn't seem feasible that they'd be able to keep him on the roster. And so there's plenty of QB needy teams out there too. He'll ultimately find his way into some form of a starting job if if there is some sort of trade that goes down. And at the end of the day, Hurts' fantasy production is built up upon his own legs. It's his own rushing upside, and that'll carry and translate with him wherever he would end up going if a trade were to go down in the first place. So, his ADP of QB10 is definitely something I want to take advantage of right now. And kind of along that same note, another quarterback that I just want to take advantage of their uncertainty is Jameis Winston being drafted around QB 25 right now. Winston is an aggressive quarterback. He's someone who's less mobile, than we particularly like, at least for chasing upside. But Winston has that aggressive downfield passing nature we saw back when he was with the Bucs. Now, of course, this past year, he was kind of in that very, very conservative Sean Payton style offense. He also had, his only weapon was Alvin Kamara. And if your only weapon's a running back, that tells you something for sure. But, if Winston, he's a free agent this year, if he goes on to join a new team, especially a team that A, lets him air the ball out in the first place, and two, also just has some sort of semblance of wide receivers to catch the ball, Winston can do big things. He's a guy that can actually catapult his way up into the QB1 range just because of his aggressive nature. So he's someone that I really want to take advantage of, potentially get a massive discount on a QB1 heading into the 2022 season. Another uncertainty that I like to hop in and explore with the quarterback position is rookie QBs. Right now we have pretty interesting gap in ADP between Malik Willis and the rest of the guys. And I think it's sort of kind of twofold. I think part of that is based on this past rookie class, or quarterback class at least specifically, that was not too impressive. And now we're getting all these rumors that this 2022 class is nowhere near as impressive and as talented in the first place. And so it's really driving down their ADPs. But, the fact of the matter is we have some great guys in there that bring their own component of rushing upside, like Sam Howell. And we have plenty of QB needy teams out there. So whether they're guys that should be starting day one or not, they just might be starting day one because of the situation we're dealing with. And it's not too often that you actually can find these type of guys with this rushing upside going this late in the first place. And that's because, in fantasy land, so many people have kind of caught on and subscribed to the whole rushing upside issue. Even people in your home league probably know about rushing upside at this point in time, just because it's become such a mainstream sort of thing. So actually finding someone with rushing upside that late is, sort of uncertainty that I want to take advantage of and that I want to draft on my best ball teams. And aside from that too, kind of flipping the switch, I like to also take some bets and get some edges with the uncertainty revolving around wide receivers. There's plenty of wide receivers out there that are dealing with uncertainty of their own, being free agents, pending trade speculations on their QBs or themselves. And those are guys that I want to, take advantage of their low ADPs right now. And, two guys I can think of are DJ Chark, Will Fuller, both guys coming off injury, both free agents. We don't know their situation going into next year. We don't know what team they're going to play for, what type of system they'll be in, who will be throwing the ball to them. And all of that just kind of culminates and provides them with like a much more comfortable ADP. And so it's an ADP that I want to take advantage of and draft as much as possible those guys, because we've seen fantasy production from them in the past. We've seen Will Fuller produce a wide receiver 10 on a points per game basis season. We've seen Chark have a wide receiver 2 season. And so there's certainly enough production that we can get out of these guys just based on where their ADP is going. So again, to kind of recap, stacking isn't really that necessary right now. I think it's best used as a tiebreaker. The time to go overboard on stacking will come, but for now, there's enough uncertainty that we can find edges in other places. So with that said, see you guys next time on 14P.
How many snaps did they run in the 14 personnel?
That's only for us.
100% of the snaps.